Tonight we are looking at 3 horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. In Canada, a caver runs out of fuel 200 meters up. In Poland, 4 tons of snow fall into the only way out. And in Papua New Guinea, a rope drifts into a waterfall. As always, viewer discretion is advised.
This is Cavern Depths. The first story begins now, and it starts the way they all do, with a plan.
On March 14th, 2026, Aaron Doucette clipped into the entrance series of Bisaro Anima, the deepest cave in Canada, 670 meters of cold limestone under a plateau above Fernie. The rock sits at 2 degrees and the water is colder. Everything in that cave is trying to take your heat. Her call-out time was 18 hours out. What does a cold cave ask of you that a warm one never does? Fuel, mostly, and the honesty to eat before you think you need to. Erin was 33, a Calgary caver with 9 Bisaro expeditions behind her, who promised her brother a text from the trailhead before every trip. Cole was 39, the trip's rigging partner, who promised his mother he would never solo the plateau in winter. His habit was the food clock. Eat something every 2 hours underground, every trip, whether you want it or not, because a caver who stops eating stops climbing about an hour later. Bisaro drops in a chain of wet shafts to a streamway, and the way out is 200 meters of rope in 4 pitches. The plan was a survey push to the 400-meter level. 4 pitches down, 6 hours of streamway, 12 hours door-to-door. What she didn't know, the 2 sandwiches in her tackle bag had gone into the water on the second pitch, and she had said nothing about it. They went down at 6 in the morning. The early pitches ran like clockwork, descenders hissing under load, meltwater dripping steadily off their helmets, boots knocking grit into the dark, the rope creaking at every rebelay. At the bottom of the 4th pitch, 5 hours in and on schedule, Erin took her gloves off and could not feel the buckles. What they didn't know, she had eaten nothing since the car park, and the cave had been drawing on her since the entrance. 40 meters up the 3rd pitch, that is when her body failed her, because the jammers stopped going up, and she hung there and could not explain to Cole why her arms would not answer. She was not hurt. Nothing had broken. She simply had nothing left to spend, and she was 160 meters below the surface. Here is what you need to understand about a cold cave. It does not kill you with an accident. It bills you for every hour you are in it. You can be fit, trained, and uninjured and still stop climbing. And this is where the arithmetic stops being about skill and starts being about calories you did not carry. So what does an empty caver actually cost a team? Time, which is the one thing a cold shaft never gives back. A fit climber does 40 meters in 10 minutes, and a hauled one does 40 meters in an hour and a half. By 4, she had stopped shivering on the rope. Panic came up beside her. The food was gone. Her arms had failed. Cole was alone. Because this is the arithmetic of a stalled climber. An upright hang starts shutting a body down inside 20 minutes. A counterweight haul moves 1 meter a pull, and there were 160 of them above her. Her light dropped to reserve at 4:30, and the pitch above turned into a rope that ended in nothing. Watch 9 expeditions buy 1 chocolate bar. Cole abseiled past her, put his own emergency ration and a hot drink into her, and waited 40 minutes on a ledge in 2 degrees for her hands to come back. Then he rigged a counterweight off the pitch head and lifted her the last 60 meters with his own body weight, 1 meter at a time, for 2 hours. Put yourself on that rope for 1 minute of it. 2 degrees, wet kit, and arms that will not close on a jammer. And the arithmetic of a partner who has to climb everything twice. Would you have told him about the sandwiches? She did not, and that is the part she still talks about. They came out of the entrance at 11:30 at night, 7 hours after she stopped climbing, and nobody had needed to be called. Another 2 hours and she would have been trapped on that rope by her own body. The trip report recorded no injury, no equipment failure, and a 160-meter assisted ascent caused by a caver who had eaten nothing in 14 hours. The club now weighs food at the car park and writes the number on the tackle bag. The deepest cave in Canada still drops at 670 meters under the plateau. A caver who stops eating stops climbing about an hour later. Cole still teaches, so eat before you want to. The report recorded 14 hours without food and 2 hours of counterweight hauling, and Aaron sent the text from the trailhead at 2 in the morning.
You're watching Cavern Depths, and this is the second story of the night. On February 21st, 2026, Tomasz Rona dropped through the snow-rimmed entrance of Jaskinia Wielka Sniezna, the deepest cave in Poland, 800 meters of Tatra limestone under a slope that holds snow into July. The rock sits at 3 degrees. The name means Great Snowy,
and it earns it every winter. Their call-out time was 16 hours out. What does a winter cave ask of you that a summer trip never does? Respect for the roof, mostly, and the roof up there is weather. Tomasz was 34, a Zakopane caver with 11 winter expeditions behind him, who promised his wife a photograph of the entrance before every trip. Kacper was 41, the club's entrance man, who dug the shaft mouth clear before anybody went down. His habit was the shovel. Leave a shovel and a spare rope at the entrance, every trip, because the way in is a hole in a snowfield, and a snowfield is not a fixed object. The system runs 18 kilometers between 4 entrances, and only one is open in February. The plan was a push to the 800-meter siphon, 11 pitches down, 10 hours below, back up the same ropes before dark. What he didn't know, a warm front had come over the Tatras that afternoon, 40 kilometers out, and the snow bridge over the entrance shaft was already dropping water. They went down at 5 in the morning. The early pitches ran like clockwork, descenders hissing under load, boots knocking ice off the ledges, meltwater dripping steadily somewhere below, the rope creaking at every rebelay. At the siphon, 6 hours in and on schedule, Tomasz turned for the surface with a full tackle bag and a good margin. What they didn't know, while they were turning around, 4 tons of wet snow came off the slope above the entrance and went down the shaft. Reaching the last pitch head, that is when the mountain failed them, because the rope that should have run up into daylight ran up into a ceiling of packed snow 11 meters thick. They pulled on it, and it did not move. The entrance they had walked through that morning was above them, and it was gone. 40 minutes of pulling and shouting changed nothing at all. Here is what you need to understand about an alpine entrance. The cave is stable, and the doorway is not. Rock does what it did yesterday. Snow does what the weather tells it, and it does not ask you first. You can rig a cave perfectly and still find the sky has closed, and this is where the arithmetic stops being about caving and starts being about digging upwards. So what does a buried entrance actually take from 2 cavers? Certainty. A rescue that has to dig from above works at about 1 meter an hour in wet snow, and nobody on the surface knew the shaft had gone. By 6 in the evening, the shaft was still shut. Panic came down with the meltwater. The bridge had failed. Their call-out was hours off. Nobody was digging yet. Because this is the arithmetic of a plugged entrance. 11 meters of wet snow, 1 meter an hour from the surface, 2 cavers in wet kit at 3 degrees, and 16 hours before anybody is told. The meltwater coming through the plug told them 2 things at once. The snow was not solid, and it was going to keep coming. Watch 11 winter expeditions by 1 shovel. Tomasz brought up the spare rope and the shovel Kacper had left at the pitch head in October, and started cutting steps up into the plug from underneath. Then they did the thing that sounds mad until you are in it. They dug upwards for 9 hours, throwing the snow down the shaft behind them. Put yourself under that plug for 1 hour of it. 3 degrees, wet snow falling into your collar, and 11 meters of it between you and the sky. And the arithmetic of a ceiling that can come down on you while you dig it. Would you have waited for the surface instead? They did not, and that is why this ends the way it does. Tomasz put an arm through into open air at 4 in the morning, 13 hours after the bridge came down, and the Tatra rescue team was on the slope above by then with probes. Another day of that warm front, and they would have been trapped under a plug twice as deep. The club report recorded a snow bridge collapse of about 4 tons, 11 meters of plug over the shaft, and a 9-hour dig from below with a cached shovel. The Tatra clubs now leave a second rope in the shaft all winter. The deepest cave in Poland still opens under a slope that holds snow into July. The way in is a hole in a snowfield, Kacper still teaches, so treat the doorway like weather. The report recorded 11 meters of snow and 9 hours of digging, and Tomasz took the entrance photograph again on the way out.
You're watching Cavern Depths, and tonight's final story is the one they still talk about.
On January 18, 2026, Alice Renton walked into Muruk, the deepest cave in the southern hemisphere, 1,200 meters of river passage falling through the Nakanai rainforest on New Britain. The rock is warm, the water never stops, and every pitch in there is rigged beside a waterfall. Their call-out time was 3 days out. What does a river cave ask of you that a dry shaft never does? Rigging discipline mostly, because the rope has to hang where the water is not. Alice was 31, a Sydney caver with 20 expeditions behind her, who promised her mother a satellite message from camp every second evening. Martin was 52, the expedition leader, the man who had pushed this river further than anybody alive. His habit was the plume check. Stand under every pitch and watch where the spray lands before you rig it. Every trip, because a rope in the water is a rope you cannot climb. Muruk is a staircase of waterfalls in warm rock, and the only way anybody has ever come out of it is by climbing beside them. The plan was a push below the 900-meter camp, 14 pitches down, 2 nights underground, then the long climb back. What she didn't know, it had rained 40 millimeters on the Nakanai Plateau overnight, and the 9th pitch was already carrying twice the water it had on the way down. They went down at 7. The early pitches ran like clockwork, descenders hissing under load, boots knocking grit into the dark, warm water dripping steadily off the roof, the rope creaking at every rebelay. At the camp, 13 hours in and on schedule, they turned for the surface with a full tackle bag and a good margin. What they didn't know, the deviation that had held their rope clear of the 9th pitch had been pulled out of line by the rising flow. 20 meters up the 9th pitch, that is when the rigging failed him. Because the rope had drifted into the plume, and Martin climbed straight up into a column of falling water that hit him across the face and would not stop. He was not hurt. Nothing had broken. He simply could not get a breath in, and he was hanging on a jammer 60 meters above the floor. Here is what you need to understand about a waterfall pitch. The water does not have to be deep to drown you. It only has to be on your face. You can hang in a harness in perfect health and still suffocate in falling water. And this is where the arithmetic stops being about strength and starts being about seconds. So what does a plume actually take from a climber? Air, and then the use of his hands. A caver in a column of water has about 90 seconds of useful movement, and Alice was 40 meters below him on the same rope. By then he had stopped calling down. Panic came up the rope. The rigging had failed. His hands were slipping. Nobody was coming. Because this is the arithmetic of a rope in the plume. 90 seconds of useful movement, 60 meters of pitch above the floor, 3 days before the call-out, and 1 deviation 40 meters out of reach. She got 20 meters up to him in 4 minutes, which is the fastest anybody has climbed that pitch. Watch 20 expeditions by 1 sling. Alice clipped a sling into the wall bolt beside her, hauled the loaded rope sideways out of the column with her whole body weight, and held it there while he got his face into the air. Then she did the slowest thing in caving. She held that rope out of the water for 11 minutes while a man who could not help her climbed past it. Put yourself on that rope for 1 minute of it. Warm water hammering your helmet, a sling cutting your forearm, and a man above you who has stopped answering. And the arithmetic of an arm that has to hold longer than the pitch is tall. Would you have let go to save your own hands? She did not, and that is why this ends the way it does. Martin Hale reached the pitch head and died there 20 minutes later, drowned by the water he had breathed on the rope, in a cave nobody can be carried out of. The expedition report recorded 40 millimeters of overnight rain, a deviation pulled out of line by rising flow, and a rope hanging in the plume of the 9th pitch, with no fault found in the original rigging. His body stayed at the pitch head until the following season. The deepest cave in the southern hemisphere still falls its 1,200 meters through the rainforest. A rope in the water is a rope you cannot climb, Alice still teaches, and she rigs every pitch twice as far from the plume as he did. The report recorded 11 minutes on the sling and 90 seconds of air, and she sent the satellite message from camp 2 days late.